2015 election will be the last federal election using first past the post. The fact of the matter is, I am not going to do something that is wrong for Canadians just to tick off a box on an electoral platform. That's not the kind of Prime Minister I will be.
Well, two very different sounding Justin Trudeaus there. Was it a broken promise, or worse, was it a lie? Grist for the at-issue mill. Andrew's away this week. Chantel is in Montreal. Althea is in Ottawa. And so is the Globe and Mail's Robert Fife. Chantal, you start us off. Why did the government kill the electoral reform bill?
Possibly because they'd been dreaming about doing it from day one. There are broken promises because you tried hard and you just couldn't. And there are broken promises when you didn't try really hard or much of anything. And I think this falls in that category. From the beginning to yesterday, the government never put forward a position, didn't seem to put any political capital in this process. Even yesterday, it's the Prime Minister and his ministers seem to argue that a political consensus should just have risen from the ground up. And since it didn't, well, that was that. Usually governments who believe that they want to fulfill a promise tend to lead from the front and not from the back.
Bob, any disagreement there?
Well, no. I mean, look, Peter, he made this promise when the Liberals were in third place. Now they have a majority government. First past the post works very well for the Liberals. And Mr. Trudeau signaled that last October in that famous interview he gave to Le Devoir when he said, well, you know, we needed proportional representation or change the electoral system because the awful Harper people were there. But now that the Liberals are in power, everybody loves us and there's no appetite for electoral reform. So basically, the Liberals have acted cynically in this sense, is that for months they've pretended that they were serious about electoral reform. They had the committee hearings, they had this online survey of Canadians when they had absolutely no intention of fulfilling this election promise.
Where are you on this, Althea?
I'm not going to go that far. I think that they meant the promise when they said it in June of 2015, and I think they meant it throughout the campaign. I just think they thought they would be able to get some experts or some public approval for the system that they preferred, which was a preferential ballot or a ranked ballot. And they found none of that at all whatsoever during this entire process. I also think they really just got outmaneuvered by the opposition. And the reason that they said no to a referendum, even at the next election in 2019, to make this pledge possibly a reality or a half promise, is because they didn't want a referendum. I mean, we can get into that. Opens a whole other can of worms. But they were squeezed in a position that was just not tenable for them because they really think proportional representation would be a disaster for this country.
Yes, but they let themselves get squeezed in that position by they never put forward a position, they never fought for a position, they didn't ask their MPs to fight for a position, and if they tried to get experts or groups to testify to their position, I have found zero evidence of that. At some point, a Prime Minister who wants to convince the country that he's got the right solution and his preferred solution has to put some skin in the game, and that never happened.
Well, let's just take the Prime Minister at his own word. What he told the Levar last October was very clear. We wanted it when it was advantageous to us, but now that we're in government, there's no need for it. And after he made that, they put the brakes to it. So I don't think they were very serious about it because they realized that first past the post benefits the Liberal Party, and it always has.
See, I think they put the brakes back a year ago when they tried to stack the committee with a Liberal majority. And then there was public outcry and they had to agree to an opposition-dominated committee. And then the minister started changing her tune. Now it wasn't about an antiquated system where, the majority of the parties in the House of Commons had supported electoral reform. It became about we need a broad consensus from Canadians that was never, ever defined. And from then on, everything was wishy-washy and a pulling back of that promise.
Let me ask it this way. In terms of a broken promise, some governments can suffer for years because of a broken promise. Mm-hmm. As we know, Justin Trudeau's father and wage and price controls for Pierre Trudeau was something he was never able to live down. Is this that kind of broken promise, Bob?
No, I don't think it is. I don't think most Canadians really care. This government is going to be judged on its handling of the Canadian economy and, more importantly, how it's going to handle Donald Trump. He's very unpredictable. Nobody knows what he's going to do next. And it always comes down to bread and butter issues. And this is one issue, electoral reform. It's important within us. It's certainly important if you're the New Democrats or the Green Party, but I don't think it's a pressing issue for most Canadians.
Althea?
I think for some Canadians it will matter. So some of the young people and some of the new voters that the Liberals got to the polls in 2015, believing that the Liberals were going to be a different type, under Justin Trudeau, were going to be a different type of political party, that he was going to be a different type of leader. What we saw this week was the Prime Minister basically showing no remorse. He didn't say he was sorry that he had broken this pledge. He suggested that they were already an augmentation of extremism in the Commons, and that moving forward would create more dissenting voices. And, you know, behind the scenes, people are suggesting there would be alt-right parties in the Commons if we went down this road. He didn't say he was sorry he had broken a promise. And instead, he showed himself to be basically like any other politician. So I think for some people who were convinced to vote last time for them, those people might not vote Liberal, or they might not vote at all.
Chantal?
I don't think it's just some people. I think it's most people have now seen the frame around Justin Trudeau as a different politician, kind of be cast away, and he's just one like the others. I agree with the others that most Canadians will not vote based on electoral reform in the next election, but there was a breach of trust here, and it calls into question every time that Justin Trudeau comes to you and pledges with his hand on his heart that he means something. You are going to remember this.
There's a bit of a debate on, you see it in social media, about whether this was a broken promise or whether it was worse, a lie. A lie, there needs to be an intent to deceive from the original moment. Any evidence of that?
It doesn't feel like a broken promise in good faith. I don't want to go down the road of lie, but to say I can't keep a promise and do so in good faith, you have to have been trying in good faith to fulfill that promise, and I saw very little evidence of that.
Bob?
Well, frankly, I think the Prime Minister made the right decision. There's nothing wrong with breaking promises if you, in the end result is probably not going to be that great for the country. There is a lot of evidence that proportional representation, or even the preferred ballot that the Prime Minister wanted, that first of all, it was going to cause an awful lot of divisions in the country. The Conservatives were going to fight that tooth and nail. The last thing he needed to do, as he's got to focus on the Trump administration, to get into a big parliamentary battle. And secondly of all, preferential voting does have a lot of problems. It leads to coalitions and minority parliaments. You only have to look in Europe where you have had proportional representation. In Europe, where you have governments that you can't throw them out, and they've been in power for a long time. The Christian Democrats in Belgium, for example, have been in power or shared government for almost 100 years. And at least the current system, you can throw the bums out.
You never hear the Germans, and I went on a trip and asked every single group we met, would you come to our system instead of your proportional system? They all looked at me in horror, as if we wanted them to go back to the cave age.
Let me ask a question that's somewhat related to that. Now, Thea, you answer it for us. There are a lot of people who actually believe the system should be changed, and we've heard their voices for a long time. This seemed to be their big moment. Is this issue, electoral reform in this country, is that dead now for another generation because of this?
No, I don't think so. I think those people are not going to stop calling for that, and I think it depends who wins the 2019 election, and if there's a coalition government, then I'm sure it'll be back on the agenda.
If anybody will believe the promise of a party that makes it, that is the problem, I guess. Chantal?
I think this was a one shot in a generation to have one of the two major parties buying into this file. And now that the Liberals are in retreat, the Prime Minister could have decided to say, the clock on this, it doesn't work. I need to extend the timeline. That's not what happened this week.
Bob?
No, but
Well, I actually think it's very possible it can happen if we get into another minority government situation where the Liberals need the support of the New Democrats. That would be the price that the New Democrats want, and I think the Liberals would probably go forward with it. So I don't think it's off the table for another generation.
Althea, you wanted to make a quick point on that?
I think Bob made it for me.
He always does that, eh? Okay, I want to shift topics, do something totally different. We saw the departure from the House of Commons this week of two, fairly long-time parliamentarians who are well-known. Stéphane Dion, former leader of the Liberal Party, John McCallum, former cabinet minister, long-term cabinet minister in a number of different governments. They both made comments on their last day in the House of Commons. Watch these.
So in conclusion, and I'm not one of those ones who say in conclusion 17 times, this is the end. In conclusion, I will miss this place. And I didn't have anyone in mind who says that. So I will miss this place and all the people in it, from my closest colleagues to my severest critics.
Cherish our democracy, always work to improve it, and from time to time, rise above the adversity and find the time, at least over a soccer game with the pages, to preserve the fraternity that unites us all.
Stéphane Dion and John McCallum. A lot of nice things said about those two gentlemen on that day by their colleagues in the House of Commons, as always happens, and there's always time to thank those who've put themselves forward for public service. But how do you tie the knot on the two parliamentary careers of either one of these two people? Chantal first?
I was around when Stéphane Dion came into politics. I took him to his first gallery dinner. He was like an alien on a very odd planet. He never laughed at a single joke. If someone had told me 21 years ago that he would become a junkie on political adrenaline, I would not have believed that. And yet he did, and he had an unpredictably long run.
Althea?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know these two probably as well as Bob or Chantal does. To me, Stéphane Dion and John McCallum are both two extremely hard workers. I've been on the airplane early morning with Stéphane Dion. He still has no idea that I'm a journalist, despite working here for 14 years. But he was always very nice. John McCallum is hysterically funny. Always appreciated his candor. Never ever lied to me, which got to be thankful for.
Yeah, that is all we ask for. Don't lie to us. Bob?
Well, and Mr. Dion, I think history will be kind to him in this sense. The Clarity Act, which he brought in under Mr. Chrétien, requiring more than 50% vote for a secessionist vote, I think is a highlight of his career. But also he was ahead of his time in advocating a carbon tax. When he was Liberal leader, he paid the price for that. But he's a man of great principle. In terms of John McCallum, I have a lot of time for Mr. McCallum. I've known back when he was the chief economist for the Royal Bank. He, as Theo says, he's a wonderful, cheerful guy. He's a very, very hard worker. And he deserves a lot of credit from this country for what he did in bringing the Syrian refugees to this country. It was a really Herculean effort, and he did an amazing job in getting all these people settled here. And one other thing for him, he was the man who nominated Nelson Mandela for honorary Canadian citizenship, and that's a pretty nice thing to end a career with.
Yeah, I'll say. You're right about that. Bob, listen, it's been great of you to join us. Thanks very much. Althea, too, and Chantal in Montreal.